Okay.
We're fine.
All
Let's
right.
go for it.
Well, I'll go. Well, welcome back to Brilliant Fishing. Today on the show, back by popular demand, we've got Mr. Glenn Allen. We're going to talk about today summer surf fishing opportunities. And so in a minute, we're just going to turn it over to Mr. Glenn. Just let him tell us a little bit about bait, species, techniques, tackle, locations. We're going to let him take us wherever he wants to take us as we talk about summer surf fishing opportunities. And because I'm willing to bet that probably like myself, there's a lot of folks out there that, you're going to go spend a week at the beach at the summer with your family or something. Maybe you want to target some fish from the surf. It's just helpful to kind of know what are the types of fish that run through there. Kind of when do they come through? What do they eat? How do you fish for them? There's a lot of opportunities. I mean, really, the season sort of begins, I think, as he told us on the last podcast, starts early, with the big reds coming through. But that's not it. There's a lot more out there to get caught. But anyway, we're going to tackle all that kind of stuff. But just to kind of get started before we get into all the nuts and bolts, I understand you've been doing some fishing.
Oh, yeah.
Well, has it been fishing or has it been catching?
A lot of waiting and, but catching, and every year is different. And this was different. We had a lot of fish at times. They weren't the real big ones, what I'm talking about, the 40 plus inchers. Right. We had a lot of what we call yearlings in the 30s, and all, but I probably had my best spring this spring, and I caught some citation fish, those 40 plus inch fish, but probably more, a good bit more yearlings. But a 35, 36 inch drum can pull.
Nothing to sneeze at.
They can pull.
There.
Yeah, I mean they're pretty feisty, so. We had a good time. It was unusual. I talked about, and I won't get because we're talking about something different.
Sure,
today.
yeah, that's okay.
But I talked in the last podcast. We talked about current.
Okay. Yeah.
But the current this year, we didn't have a lot of current. And what current we had a southeast wind blowing, which would be at the point on the south beach would be coming about like this, But you throw out there. And you get, instead of getting a right to left drift, which you like, during spring, we were getting a left to right drift, which was bringing, But it would hit you in the right spots out there at times. It'd drift you over to a spot, and that's where they would be, But, it was different. I mean, every year is different. I always learn,
That's true.
And,
you just kind of roll with whatever the weather's giving you.
I did more night fishing this time than I have, but I was fishing with some friends, and but one evening right there at dark, and I'll tell you this right quick, and then we get into the other.
That's fine.
But anyway, we're sitting there, and I'm hearing seagulls. Now this is 8 o'clock. It's getting dark down there, starting to get pretty dark. And I see seagulls at dark. I mean, drum. Where are they? Where are they? I'm looking around. I see, where are those stupid seagulls at?
Right.
Well, I look off to the right, and right there they are. And here's a school of big drum blew up on bluefish. They were chasing bluefish, and here they come to the beach.
Okay.
They're coming about as fast as I'm seeing them.
Right.
So I got a rod and a rod holder, and it's got it sand spiked out, and I wind it in. I said, I'll throw over. I didn't even have a bait on there.
Right.
The sea mullet would eat the bait off. So I bait up. My buddy's saying that's just bluefish. I said, no, that's drum chasing bluefish, and I throw out there. By then they're right in front of us. I just had to lob it out there. I can't even get the spool click back and I'm on,
Oh, man.
I said, yeah, they're drum. So,
awesome.
But that was one evening. There was a bunch of fish there real quick. But the problem was they didn't stay there. They dispersed up and down the beach, and we caught 3 apiece, my friend and myself. I lost 1, cut off the bluefish. He lost 2, cut off the bluefish. But one of our other friends, he was up the beach, and he stayed in them longer. He caught 7.
All right.
It was
fun.
But just seeing them blow up like that right in front of you where you can reach them, most of the time they're offshore where you don't stand a chance.
Sure.
But the boats killed them this spring. They were catching 100 plus a day fish,
really?
Sight fishing to them, throwing jigs.
That just makes my arm tired thinking about it.
I know, but
Man,
anyway. So we're on a different subject now.
Subject.
We're
kind of similar subject. But
similar,
we'll
but we can get I can get wound
that.
up on the spring fishing.
That's all right. Well,
the late spring,
yeah,
I mean, this time of year, and we've had a really cool spring, so things have transitioned a lot slower this year, you know. And I want, so when you get into May, then you get into what we call sea mullet fishing.
Okay.
Most people know them as
mullet.
whiting, kingfish. I think if you look them
Okay.
up, you know, it's the northern kingfish is some of them. We call those a Virginia mullet or the northern mullet. They're actually what we catch on sand fleas, though, are Gulf kingfish. They come up from Florida, come up, and they all summer here, and they'll spawn out here, you know, and all. And they're kind of pretty resident. I mean, they'll go all the way up Chesapeake Bay, but we get them when they'll pretty much stay around in the Hatteras area, upper North Carolina area until fall, and then they'll migrate back down. But anyway, let's talk about sand fleas. And everybody needs to have, if you're going to come down to the Outer Banks, have a sand flea rake and make you a bucket, and I'll go through that but in just a second. But sand fleas are really important. We catch a lot of fish off of sand fleas. It's surprising the number of people don't. I've never caught one off a sand flea. I said, well, you're not fishing them, you know.
Yeah, right.
You got to fish them, you know, and you got to have confidence in it. We have a lot of confidence in sand fleas, and we'll catch a lot of fish on sand fleas. But they won't come out until that water temperature, like I told you, 60 degrees. That's when you start seeing the sand fleas, you know, and all. And you just look for the pods of them. Once you figure it out, you know what to look for. But you can walk down the beach and see the different we call them pods, you know. And then you kind of have to, like my son says, Dwight, he said, you got to sneak up on them, Dad. He said, they know you're coming. And I think they do, you know. I think because a lot of times you get one good rake in them and then they're gone, you know. So anyway, so we'll catch sand fleas, and I just brought this. I told Jason this is a good sized bucket. It's a Lucky Buck mineral, deer mineral. But we'll take this, and I put a cut out piece of plywood, like 3/4 inch plywood, put in the bottom, drill holes through it, bolt it to the bottom of this, and then when you catch your sand fleas, you're putting them in here. You can go to an upholstery shop, get you a piece of foam rubber that scraps. They'll have scraps around there, and cut out a piece the same diameter. And as you catch sand fleas, then you're going to moisten that foam rubber and put in on top of them. That's going to keep them from dying. And you can extend the life of them. Then what we'll do at night, we won't put them directly on ice, but I might put most of the time I'll put a block of ice down and a board on top of it, set this down on top of it in a cooler, and you can make them last for a couple of days, you know. And sometimes sand fleas they've been really hard to come by. In fact, I just talked with one of my friends a little while ago. He's down, and he said finding sand fleas is the big ticket, you know.
Well, I'm going to ask a dumb question, but with the sand fleas, I mean, how important is it that they're alive?
I mean, they'll get a smell to them, and it's important that they're alive and fresh as possible, you know. And speaking about that, when you got them in there, you need to take them down to the water and rinse them periodically. They urinate, and that's what'll kill them, you know. And you get that funky smell. Now I've caught them on dead sand fleas before. I mean, I've had to fish dead sand fleas, but sand flea fishing is really, I mean, this time of year, and you'll post pictures that I've sent you, you know, everything eats a sand flea in the ocean. I mean, I've caught Spanish mackerel and sand fleas, and bluefish and everything, you know. But the main target fish is of course, I call them sea mullet or whiting, you know, and then you got your pompano, and you got your the red drum will eat them. You know, the slot-sized fish and black drum in the fall, they'll eat them. And, of course, I said pompano. But you'll have spots and croakers, they'll eat them. The good thing about sand fleas, you don't find the crabs and you know, just the junk fish, you know.
Pinfish, maybe.
Pinfish, they won't mess with them too much. And you'll catch a few rays, but not a lot. You know, not like what you'll catch on cut bait. Skates and rays, shrimp and cut bait. You'll catch a lot of skates and
Well, that
rays.
hard shell probably.
Yeah, they just
discourages
don't. I don't know. They eat them because I know I have caught them on them.
Mhm.
But anyway, and then if there's a lot of crabs in the water, the sand flea will stay on your hook a lot better. Now, hooking them is another thing. People say, how you hook them? I hook them off the backside. You know, they have, I guess, if they got the digger up here, say this is a digger. The internet says hook them right through that digger, and that way their egg sack's right up underneath there. But they've got a crease right here and a crease this way. I go right in there, and then that hook lays right in that crease, and it's a lot easier. You know.
Oh, okay.
It's a debate on that. That's not a big important thing, you know, as much as just getting them hooked and getting them in there.
Okay.
Now, fishing with sand fleas, most of the time you're going to fish real close. So it's fun fishing for kids because you're just rolling right behind the breakers, you know. I'll usually fish, I'll fish, you know, usually 3 to 4 rods a lot of times, you know, when I'm fishing for sea mullet. When I'm fishing pompano, I'll fish 5 rods, you know, because you're not having bait up as much unless there are a lot of crabs. But there again, tackle, I tend to go light. For me, I mean, a lot of people don't like to fish with. I actually fish with 10-pound test line and a 17-pound shock leader. Now this is where I do get into fluorocarbons. You know, I'm using a fluorocarbon leader, and rigs. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And I make my own rigs out of fluorocarbon. I think fish can see your line. You know, these fish can. So it's important. Fluorocarbon was a big tool for us when that came out, in my opinion. You know, I mean, I've been like this spring. I was down there and I fished for the neighbors for sea mullet a couple of days because the drum fishing was slow, and I had a freezer full. So I just said, my neighbors always, when's my fish coming? You know. So anyway, I give them fish. I was fishing beside 2 guys one day, and they never caught one, and I caught 40. So I mean. I gave them sand fleas. I said, you need to be fishing sand fleas. They didn't have any. They couldn't find any. Well, I always go fishing with sand fleas. I don't go fishing until I have my sand fleas, you know. Yeah. But where it be catching them the day before or whatever, you know. But I might spend a half a day trying to find sand fleas just to fish with. But anyway, so sand fleas are important. The rig's important. Light line, I'll still use monofilament, not braid at this point. We'll talk about braid here in a few minutes. Okay. I'm a big fan of that. And the lighter the better for the main reason, even on pompano making a long cast, I mean, I'm 12-pound test line, you know, at the heaviest on that. And that's making a long cast. But now I've got a 25-pound shock leader on there because I'm putting a lot of pressure and throwing it far, you know. Now, like Dwight, my son, he uses 30-pound because he's going to put more pressure than what I am on a long cast, you know. But with this, you can still make long cast even with a sea mullet rig, you know, because sometimes they're not right in the wash. They're out on the bar, out offshore. So and still, I'm a big fan of longer rods. I don't know, I've gotten more on this in the recent years. We're fishing a lot of 11-foot rods, you know, now. 3 of my rods for pompano are actually 12 feet, to where not only for the longer cast, but also when you put them in a sand spike, you got this like this, and then you got your trajectory going down, so you're creating a high profile, you know. And I think fish, I think a lot of people say, well, they're on the bottom. Yeah, they might be on the bottom, but they're looking up. You know, a lot of times they're looking up.
I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, they're cruising the bottom, but I think in a drum, his mouth is on the bottom, and a sea mullet too. But I'm just a firm believer they're looking up.
Really?
Yeah. Because we got into talk, and Jason, this is something, you know, you get into friends and that are good fishermen too. Well, I classify myself a good fisherman, but I'm always learning. You know, if I don't go and learn something, I feel like I miss something. You know.
Right. Yeah.
So, but anyway, we always talk about, well, how many did you catch on the top hook? How many did you catch on the bottom hook?
Right.
And I'm kind of, I'm not paying much attention to that. I'm just
Right.
just paying attention to catch it. You know? but I said, let's kind of analyze that. You know, and we got talking about it. And we were fishing a couple of days, and anyway, he made the point. He said it was about 60-40, 60 top, 40 on the bottom.
Oh, really?
And I said, well, maybe we're not making our rigs tall enough, you know. Huh. And he said, well, that could be true. But now that we got our rigs kind of a little bit different, you know, I think we're more 50-50, you know.
Okay.
There's not a lot of difference. But
that's interesting.
Anyway. So, but the average person that doesn't mean that they're not going to catch fish. You can take a 9-foot rod and don't go to the store and buy these. I see them, these wire rigs, 2-hook rigs that you put a snailed hook on there, and you know you'll catch fish on those. But when you're down there, just go to the tackle shops, and all of them have, where it's Ninja or Joe Moore's rigs or their custom rigs that somebody's making for them, that particular store. Frank and Friends has got their own rigs now, but they're all made out of fluorocarbon. They got the right side hooks on them, and they're going to catch fish, you know. I would buy rigs down there instead of buying the store-bought Walmart, you know, standard old wire rig that's...
There's just so much tackle. There's just so much.
It is.
Like that. When you got that in the water, just so much that fish can see that says don't hook.
And this is a basic rig for me, and I know the cameras are not going to be able to show a lot of it, but it's this is just a 2-hook rig right here, and you can see I got a snap down here for the weight, and that's fluorocarbon with 2 hooks on there, and I've got red hooks on there. Is there something to red hooks? I don't know.
Maybe.
After you catch fish on them, they turn gold, so I don't know. But
so for those of you that aren't watching this on the video and you're just listening to this on the audio, so it looks like, I'm gonna say this is about 2 foot long.
Exactly.
And so you've just got a snap, not a snap swivel, but just a large snap for the weight on the low end. On the top end, you got looks like a dropper loop there to attach it to your main line, or your leader.
Yeah.
And then it looks like each of these dropper loops is maybe about 4 inches, something like that.
Maybe 6.
Maybe 6.
I'm actually cutting at 10 and now 9 on this, and I'm snelling that hook on there, so that takes up. So it ends up around the 5 to 6 range. Okay. And that's a number 4 hook.
Okay, so this looks like it's a red number 4 offset circle.
Yep.
Is what that is.
Circle,
okay. And it looks like snell knot. So
yeah.
Okay. Now this rig right here is something you would put. So you're putting enough weight to 10 bottom. You're putting sand flea on each of these hooks.
And we're throwing it out most of the time just over the break right there. A lot of times there's a little trough right there. You know, as you walk into the ocean, a lot of times you'll step off into a hole.
Okay.
Well, that's where they're at. You know, I mean, sometimes they can be. Sometimes we say they're stupid close. They're right on the beach.
Right.
You know, and but that's now you can take. Now this is just a basic rig. Now I'll do different beads on this. Where it be pink beads, orange beads, white beads. Just all kinds of colored beads. Okay. And so this spring, what little bit of sea mullet fishing I did, the plain hooks worked good. Okay. Orange bead, like the egg sac of the sand flea, was a good color. I mean, they were relating to that pretty good.
So
go ahead.
This right here is, you said this is 17-pound fluoro?
That'll be 20.
This is 20.
Yeah, okay. The rig's actually out of 20. Now, this is a pompano rig. Now, this is just how I make them.
Okay.
There's all kinds of versions of pompano rigs.
Right, okay.
But as you can see,
so this one's a little longer.
Good bit longer.
So this may be 3 foot long.
It is 3 feet. Okay. Yeah, exactly. It's 3 feet. I got a cork up there. That cork, now that was a hydro dip this winter. I did some hydro dipping on corks just to come up with some different colors. And I did them with just a bead on the bottom. Now, you can make them, a lot of them have 2 corks on them or 2 beads on them, a bead on each side.
So one of the first things I know is this rig is a foot longer. Your droppers are maybe a little bit longer.
A little bit longer.
And then your hooks are a good bit bigger. So they're still red offset circles, but these are
These are number ones.
Number ones, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good bit
This
bigger.
target. This is what I call my pompano rig.
Okay.
And you can see with that thing up in a rod holder, if it's sitting like this and the rod's back this way,
Right.
then you're going to get higher in the water column. You know,
Right.
and that's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
That float's going to float up. So, yeah.
So some of these fish, I mean, I know it makes a big difference when you're fishing for, so like crappie fishing, they tend to feed up.
Mm-hmm.
And some fish, it doesn't really matter. But, you know, so maybe for pompano, sounds like you're discovering that they, you know, they feed
They do.
like
Yeah.
horizontal or maybe up
Yeah,
even.
yeah. I think they're cruising along and they're looking for they what do they call those? Coquina clams.
Oh, yeah. Coquina,
Those
yeah.
little clams. I think you'll find as many of those in a sea mullet's stomach as you will sand fleas.
Really?
So they're eating those and they're eating the sand fleas, and I think a lot of times that wave breaks and it boom and it splashes up, you know, and they're looking to, you know, because
see
they
what
get
that
scattered
stirred
real
up.
quick. They're going to grab them, you know, as they come up. So, yeah,
Well,
that's a kind of a basic rigs that we'll use spring, summer, fall,
Okay.
and you're going to catch anything on them. I'll fish when I know there's pompano there. I'm gonna fish a pompano rig. Now you'll catch sheep's head on these rigs, you know, too. And you'll catch sheep's head on a sea mullet rig, what I call the number 4 hook. Don't let that scare you. I've caught a 30-inch drum on that number 4 hook before. I mean, that's what you got to, in 10-pound test line, that's what you got to drag on a reel for.
Exactly.
And that's the fun of it. You know, you're
that'd
sitting
be
there, hey, you know, he's screaming off drag, you know, and you say, oh, this is not a ray. You know, this is a fish. So,
Well, just kind of recap here. So you're basically using, once the drum season finishes, like in May, from this point on, you're going to use. You're basically using one of these 2 rigs,
pretty much
exclusively throughout the rest of the spring, summer, fall, and sand fleas as your bait of choice,
right
for these things. Okay.
Yeah.
And now you talk about like when pompano are present, you do kind of switch over to more of the pompano style rig. So when is that? I mean, typically hot and heavy. Is it hard to say?
It should have been already here, and it has not been.
Okay.
If you go on the website and look, they're at Cape Lookout. You know, they've had some great catches down there. I think they stalled out down there,
Really?
you know, because the water temperatures. And we talk about that a lot. You know, we had a more northeast wind this spring. It should have been more southwest. That's your warmer water wind. And the fish just didn't get there, you know, just haven't got there yet. And the guys that really fish for them, they're starting to get a little bit discouraged, but they're coming.
They're coming.
They're going to, and they've caught a few more sheep's head in the past week, and that's usually what's coming ahead of the pompano, you know. And then your Spanish are just now, see, pompano Spanish in that water temperature of 68, 70 degrees. So they like that kind of more warmer water. So that they're going to come in on that warm water, you know, Spanish too.
Now you said something kind of got me thinking a little bit. You were saying sheep's head. I did not think about sheep's head as being a fish that you catch in the surf.
We do.
Really?
We really do. I have to send you a picture of the one that Samantha, Dwight's wife, caught 2 years ago. 14 pounds, 15 ounces. I mean, that thing was a tank. It was a beast.
Oh, my goodness.
And you can imagine the teeth in that monster,
boy.
you know. And Dwight said it didn't taste good at all. It was just so old, you know.
Yeah, it was. I'll tell you, I do like to eat a sheep's head, though. Boy,
it's a
those things
beast.
are good, but
It
that
was
one
a
that
beast.
big might be a little different.
We looked up. I said, what's the state record on them things? At 16 pounds something. So she was a pound off state record. We didn't know what she had,
crazy.
you know. But anyway, yeah, it was funny. But
That's cool.
Right before that, Dwight had called a pompano, you know, because we just pulled up, my friend and myself. He said, I just caught a pompano. And we were sitting there getting stuff out, tackle out and all. When about that time, the rod goes down, Samantha jumps on it. She's pretty good about that.
There's one in every crowd.
Yeah.
You know.
And,
It's usually me.
Dwight kind of said, he said, I baited it up, threw it out there, put it in the rod holder, and she's over there fighting it. I said, okay, that's good.
How it works.
That's
Sometimes.
good. That's okay.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I'll tell you what though, happy wife while you're fishing. That's probably not a.
That's not a
bad thing. No,
it's not a bad thing. But anyway, so that's sheep's head, then the pompano, and all this time too. You can be catching sea mullet. Now you'll catch sea mullet on these float rigs. Some guys really like a float rig for sea mullet fishing. I catch enough sea mullet on a regular rig with beads or plain hook that I don't really want to go to floats, because if the crabs are bad, the crabs are they're gonna mess your cork up. Beads, they can't mess with those. They can clamp down on them, but they ain't gonna destroy them. Not like a. But I had something back here. One day I was fishing pompano back. I've been home a week and a half now. But anyway, when I wound it, I had him on there and was cranking him in. About that time, here comes I had one sea mullet rod out, and one hit it and had it pulled down, so I switched over. When I wound it in, the cork was cut all the way in two, and this hook right here was completely straight. And the only thing I can figure, it could have been a sheep's head, or it's probably a turtle.
Oh, could be.
I bet you it's a turtle. Just because that's what it felt like. It didn't feel like a fish when I was cranking it. I said, man, it's just, I could just feel a little bit of kind of like that, and there's turtles in the surf now.
Yeah.
So because they're starting to come up on the beach, and lay their eggs are getting ready to.
Okay. All right. Well, just where you want to take us next?
I think we need to talk about, since we're talking about this type of fishing, let's talk about structure right quick, what we're looking for.
Okay.
When you go out on the beach, people will tend to stop, and just stop and start fishing something. Well, this looks good. Well, why does it look good? That's the, I kind of ride by somebody and say, why are they fishing there?
Right.
That's the least place I'd pick. Not that I pick the best place all the time. And sometimes I'll say, well, I see why they pick that spot. They're catching fish there. I don't know why, but they're catching fish there. Yeah. But anyway, most of the time I'm riding down the beach and I'm looking at the structure where the beach cuts in. It's got a good hole in there, especially on high tide, because you might not find a lot of structure except maybe 2 hours before high tide, 2 hours after. You got a 4-hour window in there that they might be in there, and then the water pretty much pulls out and it's a dead spot, until the next tide, high tide. Some spots are good all day long because you can, the outer bar is close enough you can throw out on the bar. Now, something we've learned in the past years, don't be afraid of fishing sand fleas on the outer bar. People think of sand flea fishing right on the beach. No, if there's sea mullet there, or drum, or pompano, especially pompano, they're more of an outer bar fish, But anyway, throw out on that outer bar if you can reach it. That's a good thing about an 11-foot rod and a 12-foot rod. Now, I don't use a 12-foot rod on sea mullet fishing, but I do use 11-foot rods because you still can cast out on those bars, And back last fall, that was the spot. We found it was where a trough came into just a big opening, and it had an outer bar that or what I call an inner bar that came it didn't parallel the beach, it kind of jutted out some, and it widened out, and then it had a big, just kind of like pond in there with an outer bar out there. And we first started fishing it, we was fishing it in real close. There's fish there, all right. There's about like this, little sea mullet. So I baited up and threw out on the bar out there. I couldn't even get in the rod holder, and one hammered it, and it was a nice, pound and a half or so, a nice fish, cool. Sea mullet. And anyway, but we figured it out, and that place was great, but you had to figure it out. And then we found out as the water went out, they were on the outer, the big old trough area out there. They were on that bar out there. So they went from that into the inner bar and just in that pond area, that pool area. So it was an unusual spot, that most people would probably ride by and say, that doesn't look very good. But I kind of opened my eye a little bit. I said, in the future I need to be looking. But most of the time we look for the structure that it's got an outer bar. There's a good trough inshore, and you can throw on that inside lip, and it's got deep water right there. And they'll transition through that trough in and out. I mean, they might be going down, up and down the beach this way. Sometimes I think they come in from the deep water offshore. Once, if they're on that outer bar out there, they'll move in on the beach at high tide because they know the sand fleas are going to be there, or the clams and all are there to feed on. So look for structure. Pompano fishing is you're looking for the offshore structure. That don't mean that you can't catch them right on the beach. You can, but most of the time pompano, you've been to the beach, Jason, and you walk out there, you hit that trough. There's a bar out there, sandbar out there, and you come up on it. And I mean, sometimes you have to step this high up to get on that sandbar because it's a big washed out area right there on the inside. We call that inside of the bar. That's the pompano spot a lot of times, right there on, if you can, that's hard to do. If you can throw on that bar and then work it back down to where you kind of feel it drop back off into that trough right there, and then let it sit there. Or
that's cool.
On the back side of the bar, on the ocean side of the bar. So when I'm pompano fishing, I try to put, and you're going to catch sea mullet too. Try to put one right on the beach, one in the middle of the trough, one on the inside of the outer bar, and one on the outside of the outer bar. And then that way it kind of dictates where the fish are. And then I'll start relating to that. If I start catching fish in one particular area, then I'll start targeting in that area. But yeah,
that makes sense. Just cover all the different zones, and then you see what the fish are really keying in on, and you can change things.
And also on that, sand flea fishing is just like any bait fishing. It's going to wash out. You're not going to. They're feeding off a sight, but you can catch sea mullet in the color waters, that chair over there. I mean, just chocolate color, because they're feeding on scent. A lot of times. Sight too when it's clear, but once I've been in the water 10, 15 minutes, I'm winding in, and if a crab hadn't eaten me off, if even the sand fleas are still there, I'm putting you on. Because if you pick up a sand flea and smell it, especially after you hook it, they got quite a strong smell to them.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, they do. And one tip that, maybe it's a tip and maybe it's not, but a guy told me one time, he said, have you ever noticed you catch one and you throw right back in the same spot and you'll get another one? And I said, yeah, I've done that. I mean, that'll be the hot spot. And he said, did you ever think about that sea mullet you just caught? It crushed that sand flea and put all that scent in the water and pulls them in. And then you throw right back in it, and you can't even get it back in the rod holder, and you got another one on, and then you might catch another one just real quick. And I said, that's the thought. There again, that's what you talk with different people about different things,
Right.
So, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I can see that. I could totally see that being a reason why. Because they go in and sort of they're stirring up that water and crushing that shell and getting all that juice out in the water.
Now this, like you were talking about earlier, this is our late spring, our spring, summer, fall. And the good thing about it, the Outer Banks, once October the 15th gets here, they open up a lot of the ramps, especially on the north end, say from Cape Point north, in front of the villages all, that you couldn't access before. So like ramp 38, you can go after October the 15th, you can go north on it. North of Avon is ramp 34. So you can come off of ramp 34 back down south. You can go up to 23 is not open until October the 15th, and that gives you access to the whole Rodanthe area up through there. There's a lot of beach up there. And especially I like the the northern beaches in the fall of the year because the fish are migrating back south.
Okay.
So you're catching them coming back down. In the spring, we tend to focus a little bit more south, like down at Hatter's Village where the ferry is, that takes you over to Ocracoke, and then start pulling up. This year, actually, Ramp 38 that was south of Avon was good early, this year. There was a lot of sea mullet being caught up in that area, but yeah. So it's for kids and all, it's like a friend of mine, that drumfish. We were talking, and he's got young kids, and he said, I've never sand flea fished. And I said, well, let me just go through a few things with you, And I gave him, ended up giving him a rig, and I gave him some. He said, and he said, I'm thinking about the kids as they get a little bit older. I said, oh, they'll love it. You can get them hooked on fishing real quick by catching sea mullet, because if you get into them, and they don't care if they're this big or this big.
Yeah, they don't care.
No, I do, because I don't want to. I'm not going to keep any small ones. I'm going to try to keep 12 inches or above where I can get a good fillet out of them.
Right.
But anyway, yeah.
Well, yeah. If you want to keep kids interested in fishing, it needs to be.
Gotta be.
It needs to be catching and not so much fishing.
Catching.
Because,
we'll have our grandkids coming up in another couple of weeks, and I can't keep their attention on fishing too much.
Right.
They're more into boogie boarding.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay. I get to do my fishing. But anyway,
it's fun. Well, and they're good to eat too.
They are. They are.
Eat.
Yeah.
You fillet them things out. I know some people maybe don't like them, but I mean, a lot of people that they don't want a fish that tastes like fish, but I mean, it's good. It's
they
good
are.
eat.
When they're fresh, they're about as, they're a little bit, maybe a little bit stronger than a flounder, but not a lot.
Not much.
And when you freeze them, they still don't get real strong if you skin them. Now
Right.
I have found that if you leave the skin on them, and they're get some age in the freezer, they'll start getting a little strong. Not much though, but
yeah, but they're good.
they are good.
That's a good eating
And I like
fish.
them fried, or I'll grill them. They're with no skin on, they're a little bit hard to grill because they'll fall apart on you. But if I'm gonna grill them, I try to keep skin on them, But or blackened, either one, Of course, I'm a fish eater, seafood eater. I can't get enough.
Well, good.
I guess what we need to do is talk also about setup for Spanish mackerel and bluefish.
Okay. All right, sounds good.
Let's
go into that.
Yeah, that's something different. And this is the time that I will use braided line. Braided line will throw, on sea mullet fish, I don't like braided line. I want something that's going to stretch a little bit. And like we talked about on the drum fishing, we don't use braided line. We use mono. But so I'll use for Spanish and bluefish, I'm going to use 10-pound test line braid. Sounds a little light, but at the same time,
Well, you got a drag, you said.
Yeah, exactly. You're there again. On this, the farther you can throw, the better off you are, So, and I'll use 11-foot rod. Now, you can use a 9 or a 10-foot rod. It doesn't matter. You can get it out. Sometimes they're right on the beach, so it doesn't matter. But 10-pound braid, put a fluorocarbon leader on it, a good 3 feet or something, in that range. Knots on that, or Alberto knot, or, they got, I think a uni knot will work on braid to and there again, that'll be fluorocarbon. And I will use about 20 pound fluorocarbon on this, because you're going to tie your lure directly on, no swivel.
Right.
They're really shy. Spanish blues aren't particularly shy, but Spanish are really shy of hardware. So tie directly. You're going to get cut off. You're going to lose some lures, but you're going to get 4 times as many bites. It's all about getting the bites.
Right. It's a good trade-off.
Yeah. And I showed you, you could post that about Frank and Friends website on the colors of lures and all. Every year it changes a little bit. But you can't go wrong with a pink and white or pink and silver pretty much,
Okay.
That's pretty much, they like pink and they like silver, you're going to catch them in clear water, pretty much. They're not going to be, Spanish are not going to be a dingy water fish. Bluefish will be a little bit, but Spanish are going to be clear water. You can buy these out at Fleming's, and they're a good bit cheaper. And we're talking about a tackle shop right here in Salisbury.
Right.
But they carry them, and they're a good bit cheaper. They're probably $1 cheaper per lure than they are down at the beach. But you got the variety down there of a lot of different colors.
Sure.
And
now these lures that you're using, these are like a casting spoon or casting jigs. They're sort
just
of like the diamond shape or a.
No, they're just kind of. They're metal, and they can have a treble hook on them. And now they're putting a single hook on them, which I think is good because treble hooks are hard to get out of the mouth, especially if you want to release them.
Right.
If you don't want to keep many, you'll kill a fair number with treble hook.
Okay.
But they're 2 ounces or 1.5 ounces, and we'll talk a little bit about a 2 ounce. If you got wind and all, especially right in your face, then 2 ounces is pretty hard to beat. And you can get that way when you're winding, you can feel your lure.
Okay.
If you're not dealing with a wind problem, you can use 1.5 ounces. In fact, I beat my son one time pretty bad by that because they were talking about light wind, and I switched to 1.5 ounces, and 1.5 ounces has got a little bit more action than a 2 ounce. You can slow down just a little bit, but yet it's got a good wobble to it. I mean, because all it's doing is doing this back and forth. That metal, it's just got a little tight wobble to it, and that's what they're after, But most of the time it takes down there a 2 ounce, most of the time. Sometimes you can get by with 1.5 ounces.
Cut through the wind and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. And like I say, you want to try to cast it as far as you can, and you want to crank it. For Spanish mackerel, you're going to crank it. You need a high-speed reel. You don't have to. That means you're just going to have to crank faster. But, I mean, I've got a high-speed reel, and I'm turning about like this, I mean, you can't pull it fast enough for Spanish mackerel. They're going to.
Yeah,
and when they hit it,
really have some
speed. When they hit it, I mean, especially if it's 3 or 4 pounder. I mean, they're gonna almost jerk the rod out of your hands,
Yeah.
But it's fun. It's nothing like a good Spanish bite, But So let's see. We covered I think we went through the sand flea deal good enough, to most people, and then. But this is pretty much when you get into spring and summer and fall, it's pretty much the same thing. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a rod out, especially as you get in more into the fall of the year, like with cut bait on it, and that could be back to a drum rig or just, or even these 2 hook rigs, with cut bait on it. Yeah, you're going to pick up some skates and rays with it. But you got the drum; they're starting to migrate back down too, and there can be, and even during the summer, we'll catch puppy drum all summer long, well, puppy drum, what I call slot fish.
Sure,
We'll catch those all summer long, and usually in September, when the winds turn predominantly northeast and you get some cooling effect, they're going to start coming out of the sound back into the ocean, especially the smaller drum and the yearlings and all. So it's good to have a rod with cut bait on it, thrown out too, No,
that's probably good. Yeah, good advice. And and we talked about cut bait in the last episode. We were talking about the fishing for the big drum, and there's some good tips in there about how to present your cut bait and prepare it and scale it and how to hook it and all that kind of thing. But no, that'd be good. Cut bait.
And I'll just while we're talking, I'll tell everybody my learning experience this spring. A friend of mine, he was catching bait over on the sound side, pretty jumping mullet, or striped mullet, for fishing. And anyway, so Dwight comes down, my son, he's fishing. We're not. I mean, it's a few being caught, not many. But we're not catching anything. So he goes up there. We bought some bigger mullet from Frank and Friends. He goes up there and preps it, 3 casts in a row, 3 fish in a row.
Right.
And I said, I said, that's kind of odd. And so I got talking to some people. They said, I think sometimes they don't like that, what they call mud mullet from
Okay.
over in the sound. There's something about this creek mullet. And I was
Huh.
talking to Joe Moore at the, Joe knows a lot of
Okay.
me. Joe's in his 80s. I mean, very experienced. I said, what do you think about that? And he said, nah, don't use it. And he said,
Really?
he said sometimes they won't bite it. He said it ain't got the smell like a ocean mullet has.
Really?
Yeah. So I mean, but anyway, I mean, you know, it's just, I mean, daggum,
All
every
bait
time
is
turn
not
around.
created equal.
No,
Yeah.
I don't guess so.
I'm
But
gonna tell you,
anyway,
it's
we
funny.
call it the mud mullet, you know. So, but I know where they're coming from. Daggum, it's $4 a pound. I went to Frank and Friends one day.
Yeah.
2 fish, 2.5 pounds a piece. They were 5 pounds and $20. You
Yeah.
know, for 2
Right.
fish, and the head was half of it that you had to throw away.
Yeah.
But I will say they liked it. You know,
Yeah.
we caught fish off of
Right.
it. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I mean, you don't spend all that money on gas and fishing tackle to go over there and then cheap out on bait that, you know. But I think for fishing, I think it's a lot of times it's like we are as people. I mean, you'll drive past a bad restaurant to go to a good one.
Yeah.
I mean, I will. I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
if you know what you like and
Yeah.
that's what you want, and for some reason that doesn't measure up and I don't want it,
Yeah.
you know. So
Well,
that
I
does
mean,
make sense.
It
I
does.
mean,
We had a guy several years ago, and I always got stories, but this guy's from West Virginia, nice guy,
Mhm.
you know, driving a dually diesel. So you can imagine, you know, his fuel costs coming from
Sure.
West Virginia down there in a dually,
right.
and we're just catching the heck out of sea mullet and caught a big sheep's head and all.
Mhm.
And he said, "What are y'all doing?" And we said, "Well, you're fishing with fluorocarbon." No, I ain't fishing with that stuff. It's too high. You know,
Too expensive, right?
too expensive. You know, it was so. Really, the conversation was over with then, because if he ain't gonna,
Yeah, right.
if he's not willing to spend a little extra on line,
Right.
then. But he is spending all that money, you know, and I said, that don't make sense.
Right.
If I'm going to drive all this far, I'm going to do the best I can to fish
Yeah.
with the best I can. Now, I don't have to have the best rod and reels, you know, but I'm going to
Sure,
have good
yeah.
tackle, and I'm going to be prepared, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I noticed there's just where some fish it doesn't really matter. Some fish doesn't really matter about fluorocarbon. And some fish it does, and it just
Mhm.
pays to pay attention to that. And, I mean, really, when we're talking fluorocarbon line, yeah, it's expensive, but you don't have to fill your reel with it. You just talking about a liter.
Oh,
just
that's
a
right.
piece.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, actually,
Last piece.
I'm using 10-pound P line, you know, as my
Uh-huh.
main line, you know, but it's clear, you know, but then I use that fluorocarbon. But on my
Mhm.
pompano, because we're making long distance casts, I'm actually using a fluoro yellow line,
Mhm.
you know, what they call night crystal, you know, it's
Mhm.
put out by Sakuma,
Mhm.
but it's yellow line, you
Mhm.
know, fluorescent. But then I put that fluorocarbon leader on
Mhm.
there, and at least I can see my lines, you know, because there again, the pompano is bad about they won't come straight in. When you have one of them, when you catch one, they're usually going to take off left or right and run the bar for a ways, you know, and
Okay.
they'll be up and down the beach, so they're going to cross over and under your lines, you know,
Mhm.
if you got multi lines out. So I'm trying to keep
Mhm.
them getting tangled, you know, as much as anything. But yeah, fluorocarbon, as long as you use a long enough leader, you can get by with fluorescent line, you know.
Yeah, for
It's-
sure. You just don't
yeah.
want the piece right in front of the bait to.
Yeah. Now
Well,
on sea mullet fishing
you-
though, I'll use a clear line because I'm usually not throwing out very far. So I'm
Sure.
not trying to. It's not like I've got lines crossing so much.
Yeah,
but I will
it
feel.
wouldn't matter.
I mean, people say, "How do you keep 4 lines from tangling?" I said, "Well, you pay attention. You know,
Well,
you're sitting
yeah.
there. You're not on your phone. You know, you're fishing. You know, you're looking. When you get a bite, you're over there grabbing it and winding
yeah.
it in. If you don't, he is down there in the other lines. You know, you got a mess.
Yeah.
You know."
And then sometimes you do get a tangle once in a while.
You
but,
do,
But you
and-
get less if you're paying
Yeah,
attention.
and if you're catching a lot of fish, then that's when you have to cut back on how many rods you're fishing. I mean, a lot of times I'll get down to 3 rods or 2 rods. I mean,
Yeah.
if they're really in there, you can't keep them baited.
That's
you
a
know,
good problem
I
to
mean,
have.
it is a good problem to have. You know.
Well, let me ask you this,
Okay.
and I'll see if you got an opinion on this.
Okay.
I know I've got an opinion, but I just want to see what you think on this whole fluorocarbon line, issue. I think we all know it works. Fish
Mm-hmm.
can't see it, but do you see a big difference between the stuff they sell as fluorocarbon, quote unquote, leader material, and then just a roll of fluorocarbon
No,
line.
I don't.
Okay, I don't either. I just tend to just buy like a roll of like the whatever pound test, like if it's 20 or whatever.
I do like Cigar.
Yeah,
I like
that's
their
usually what I get.
Yeah, and they sell that at Fleming's. That's readily available. I've used several others, and they're good. But and I've used what you're talking about, just a leader material. But most of these rigs are made out of just regular Cigar fluorescent line. Not the leader. But now another thing that, if you're doing a lot of fishing, and this is another tip that I got from Joe Moore, he said, with a period of fishing, he said, especially on pompano fishing, because you're throwing out on the bar and you got a lot of line out, he said your fluorocarbon leader is going to frost over. It's
really?
It's going to frost over. I said, yeah. I said,
what?
And he said, you need to change it. He said, they can see it then.
So how does it get frosted over? I guess just with the
on the shells and sand and all. You dragging it over the sand all the time, and it will come in after a day or two, of steady fishing. I can see it. I mean, wind in it, and he calls it frosted. He said your fluorocarbon is frosted over. He said you need to change it.
It's interesting.
And also on rigs, if you fish, I mean, especially as much as we do, and you get a couple of days of it, those circle hooks, dragging it through the sand, they're going to become dull. You're going to start losing a lot of fish.
Okay.
And when I start losing a lot of fish, I said, time to change rigs.
Yeah.
And that's where I spend the winter, January, February, making rigs. That way I don't run out of rigs.
Good to do in the house.
It gives me, Jane says, my wife, she'll say, where are you going? I say, I'm going down to the basement. Oh, you're going to make rigs for about 3 hours, aren't you?
I want to enjoy every minute of it.
Yeah. I don't know what else we've missed, but
I think that gives us a pretty good starting point. I did on the Spanish. I did have one question, and you may have said this, and I think you did say it actually before we started recording. But the casting spoons or jigs that you're talking about that you can get at Fleming's, different places. Was there a particular brand name on those that you like, or?
No, a lot of them are just local, especially on the Outer Banks. Okay. Just local people make them, or you might have a supplier down there that's got a mold, and he does a good paint job on them and all.
Okay.
Yeah,
so they're probably not as important as
they're more. We call them just a Sting Silver, because that's what they were called years ago.
Okay.
Sting Silver.
It's just sort of a style.
Yeah, when you go into tackle shops down there, I mean, they got.
Yeah,
hundreds of them up there in different weights and all. But I'd stick with 2 ounce and 1.5 ounces.
Okay.
2 ounce you can use all the time. 1.5 ounces is going to be a little bit, selective.
Sure.
Depending on the wind and how far they are. You got to be able to reach them. If you can't reach them, then you ain't gonna catch them. And my daughter-in-law 2 years ago, she was sitting there. They were coming around the point on the north side. And there was a mud line out there. We'll call it a mud line. It was a break between dirtier water and clear water. And they were in that clear water.
Yeah.
But you couldn't reach them until they came around on the north side. And she was sitting there. And I said, how's she catching them things, And about that time she'd cast. She'd see one porpoise. They'll come up out of the water in porpoise. And she'd see one come up out of the water on that break line. She'd cast out there, and we wasn't able to get over into the clear water very far, but she knew there was fish in that clear water, and she'd hook up, and everybody around was kind of looking, what's she doing different?
Yeah.
And I was sitting there and I said, you're waiting till you see them out there in that clear water where you can reach that one spot. She said, yeah. And I said, yeah, I done figured you out now.
I'll tell you, that's a lot of it, is just pay attention.
It is.
You got somebody that's got it figured out, got it dialed in. It's like, what are they doing different?
And sometimes you can do everything completely right, you ain't gonna catch them. It's just not your day. I mean, I said, Lord, tomorrow you'll make it a better day for me, won't you?
Yeah.
Today I just got to watch. Today I got to watch and learn. Tomorrow I'm gonna catch.
That's it. That's the plan.
But it's nothing like I will say fresh Spanish mackerel. Have you ever had fresh ceviche made out of Spanish mackerel.
I have not. That's on my list.
Oh man, I got a good recipe for that. It's a local guy down there,
Okay.
and Spanish makes good ceviche. You know,
Really?
especially if you got fresh tomatoes and man,
Yeah, that's
I
good. I
can't
like
do it
some
for-
ceviche.
yeah.
We made some homemade. What was it? Sheep's head ceviche a while back. And I really
Really?
like that. Yeah, it was
Oh
good.
yeah.
But I bet it'd be really good with Spanish.
This particular individual, he said that sea mullet, you know, makes good ceviche. I said, okay. I said, I ain't tried that.
Yeah, I hadn't tried it. I mean, I assume you could probably use any.
You can use
You know.
bluefish too. You
Yeah.
know, really a stronger, oilier fish. They say is better. You
Yeah.
know, but
Well, you're putting all that lime, citrus
That's-
juice in
that's
with it.
taking-
It's going to cut that oil anyway.
It
It's
is.
going to be good.
it is. You know, you don't. There's nothing fishy about it. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
my wife, she doesn't. I'm not eating that. I said, just lime juice has got it all.
It's got it covered.
It's
It'd
got
kill
it covered. Yeah, it's good. All right.
Well, I think that about covers it for today. I think this will get us caught up, give us some things we can fish for through the summer, and hopefully, if you're headed out to the beach, you can take some of these tips along with you and catch more fish.
Exactly.
If you catch some, you can make ceviche out of it. Well, listen, it's a privilege to have you come back in today and talk about fishing. I always enjoy
Yeah.
talking about fishing.
Sure do.
On camera, off
Yeah.
camera. If I'm not
Yeah.
fishing, I like to be talking about
I like to be talking about it, yeah. And looking at the weather report, say I might need to be there next week.
That's right. Yep.
But I got a doctor's appointment.
Okay, well, yeah.
But I got to work too a little bit. Still
You gotta
working some.
Work a little
Yeah.
bit, yeah. I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, I think with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off. Appreciate y'all watching, listening,
Yeah.
wherever you're watching or listening from. If you checking us out on YouTube, appreciate that. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We actually almost up to 1,000 subscribers. We'll be
Wow.
doing a giveaway for that. Which reminds me, by the way, I don't know if you're watching this, you can see the hats on the table and some of these lures and things. We're going to be doing a 1,000 subscriber giveaway pretty soon and be giving away some of this stuff and some other things. We got some brilliant fishing hoodies and things like that. So we've got these hats that actually Fleming's, we were talking about Fleming's earlier, gave us. So we're going to be giving those away. The Spec Slayer crappie fishing jigs, we'll be giving some of those away as well. So again, if you watch us on YouTube, you can see those things I'm talking about. If you more of a podcast listener, don't forget to go over to our podcast. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Music, Apple Podcasts. There's lots of different audio versions and platforms that you can listen to us on. So, well, with all that said, I think we about covered it for today. This is Brilliant Fishing, signing off.